To order at 8:49 p.m. Number 2, receive presentation and new cannabis law. Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Bowden. So tonight, staff's going to do an overview of current cannabis law, some of the decisions, ramifications that the board needs to consider. But again, the major purpose tonight is really to solicit resident input in terms of some of the decisions the board has to make, which they will be at a future date. So I'm going to kick it off, and then we'll have some staff jump in. If the village attorney jumps in, he may take part of this. If not, I'll do it. Basically, Public Act 101.0027 created the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. It's effective January 1st next year. And so again, the highlights tonight, overview, zoning options, impact on public safety. We'll talk about revenues also. 33 states have legalized marijuana broadly in some form, while 11 states and the nation's capital have legalized recreational use. Denver leads the way in the U.S. when it comes to on-site consumption, and they allow for business-like restaurants and coffee shops that already exist to apply for separate indoor areas in their facility where individuals are allowed to consume edibles and pot vapor. So some of the general provisions, it applies to only 21 years and older. You can legally possess up to 30 grams of cannabis, 500 milligrams of THC-infused products, and 5 grams of cannabis concentrate. It will still remain illegal to smoke marijuana in public places or to drive while under the influence. Personal cannabis will be allowed in most private residence, but is not prohibited not in prohibited areas, including any public place or in close physical proximity to underage persons. Homegrown cannabis will be limited to authorized medical cannabis participants and is limited to 5 plants. So questions for us is, can the consumption, possession of cannabis be banned by local municipality? And the answer is no, we cannot ban or override the law. However, we can enforce related ordinances consistent with the act, such as violations for consumptions in public places and schools. What does the law allow us to do? And allows us to choose whether we will allow or prohibit the local retail sale or on-premise consumption of adult-use cannabis by businesses within our jurisdiction. So essentially, there's really a couple of choices here. One, the choice to opt out. If a municipality chooses to opt out, it may adopt and enforce local ordinances to regulate the possession, public consumption, cultivation, growing, processing, dispensing, and transporting of adult-use cannabis, as long as the regulations and penalties are consistent with the CRTA. The choice to permit means that if we allow it, we are allowed to exacting zoning ordinance and regulations, which again we'll talk about in a little bit, that designate the time, place, manner, and number of cannabis business operations. This would also include requiring minimum distances not only between cannabis locations, but also between cannabis business locations and certain types of other municipalities throughout the village. Additionally, we would have authority over whether on-premise use is allowed, and also we could opt in and may impose a municipal purchase excise tax on adult cannabis products of up to 3% of the purchase price. So again, a little bit more on the revenue. Essentially, it depends on the THC levels, but the state is going to tax sales at 10% for cannabis with THC levels at or less than 35%, 25% for cannabis with the THC levels above 35%, and then 20% for cannabis-infused products such as edibles. So for municipalities, the rate of tax cannot exceed 3% of the dispensary's gross receipts from the sale of non-medical cannabis, And if we do decide to impose this tax can only be imposed in % increments. So in addition, the state's regular state sales tax of 6.25% applies along with any potential local taxes we may apply. And it is collected and enforced by the Department of Revenue. The next two slides really are just charts that kind of show what other communities are doing, and there's a variety of communities that are permitting, prohibited, undecided in our area. There's a couple communities, Orland Park and Mokina, that have decided not to do it. Some are still considering. But this is obviously, with the opt-out decision coming up January 1st, there's a lot of communities making decisions right now. So now I'm going to have Kimberly come up and talk a little bit about essentially what a cannabis facility, if it's built, would look like, and just some of the zoning considerations.
Good evening. Zoning, okay. So we have a few slides to show you some examples of some facilities currently we have here in Worth, Illinois, mixed-use building here of a location. Next slide, we have here in Evanston, where you can see it's in a mixed use within the first floor, kind of blend in with the building. We have here in Joliet Road, or excuse me, in Joliet, where this is more of a cultivation center, where you see that in an industrial area. Obviously, they need a lot of space because they're cultivating. So that's just kind of a quick view of what you can see, how some of these facilities can look like. So in 2014, the village did enact some text amendments to allow medical cannabis cultivation facilities as well as medical cannabis dispensing facilities. And medical cannabis cultivation facilities currently are a special use in the ORI district, as well as medical cannabis dispensing is a special use in the M1. Currently, Tinley Park has 0 medical cannabis dispensaries. They are prohibited in areas zoned residential. Might be hard to read, but here is a map at one point that was presented when we were reviewing this text amendment. This is the cultivation locations and where the village would permit them. Again, they are special use in the ORI. The next is a slide that shows where the dispensaries could be located, but based on our zoning, we only allow them in the M1. So very limited areas in town where those facilities can locate currently. So when we're looking at this, the recreational cannabis dispensaries we know may open January 1 of 2020 with the state license. We're asking, the community, should the village choose to opt out of permitting this use? And if not, what zoning districts are appropriate? Should dispensaries be permitted or conditional uses? So the zoning process for that, if the policy question is, should recreational cannabis be a permitted or special use? A permitted use, just to be clear, is something that is allowed by right. It wouldn't require them to go to the Plan Commission. It would be a simple business license application, change of use with the building department, and they can operate. That would not require any board approval either. Special use process, this is where we look at the use in consideration of where they're looking to locate, and it would require a plan commission process, a public hearing, which then would be recommended to the village board. That could take approximately 60 to 90 days, and again, ultimately the vote would lie at the village board level. But additionally, we may need to approve a text amendment for recreational cannabis dispensaries if we decide to make this a permitted use. We also may need to add definitions to the zoning ordinance as well if we would like to allow this in our community. In our community, we have several zoning districts that we would have to take into consideration if we were to allow these in our community. I've listed all the various districts. I'll quickly walk through them. The first district being the Legacy District, and even within that district, we have other sub-districts. So I think in general, we need to have a conversation if we want to allow it in the downtown at all. Currently, the medical cannabis dispensaries are prohibited in all the Legacy districts. So if we want to mimic the medical, we could easily mimic the recreational in the legacy code. But the legacy code is a variety of districts that are mixed use. Some are strictly residential, some are civic, some have a mixture of commercial or residential that can go there. The B1 district is our lowest business district. We call it our neighborhood shopping center. And it's really intended to provide areas for retail, to supply convenience goods for the daily needs of the residents living in these adjacent residential neighborhoods. Typical things you see are pharmacies, florist shops, barber shops, banks. A note that taverns and packaged liquors stores are currently special uses in these districts, and tobacco stores are currently not permitted in these districts. They, B1s are mostly limited to the 80th Avenue corridor. There's about 8 properties zoned the B1 district. They're on the intersections of 167th, 171st, and 179th, all which are in close proximity to residential areas. And we have a picture of just kind of a sampling of some of the centers that you'll be familiar with that are B1. You know, again, mix of uses in there, mostly kind of serving the immediate area. B2 is our next district as you move up. And this is the community shopping district where we look for a wider variety of retail type businesses with personal uses and other complementary uses. They are permitted uses that not necessarily serve the nearby residences, but would bring other people from the other areas. The only area, though, that we have zoned B2 in Tinley Park is the area fronting 159th Street between Harlem and Oak Park Avenue. This includes the Brementown Mall, which includes Menards, and the Tinley Plaza, which has Waltz. Both properties front major commercial corridors. They were developed as planned unit developments, which provide additional flexibility within those zoning regulations, but that is the only B2 district that we have currently in the community. When staff was looking at the potential recreational use, we kind of grew an idea that it would be more of a regional draw. We expect that this would be something similar to big box retailers. Assuming recreational cannabis will function similarly, the village might look to the higher intense commercial districts, which would be our B3. This is where you do see our largest shopping centers, such as Brookside Marketplace, the Convention Center. They are located along major transportation systems as LaGrange Road and Harlem Avenue, and they are our usually largest shopping centers. It should be noted that packaged liquor stores are permitted in a B3. Again, recreational cannabis would require you to be of 21 years of age. If we treat it similar to packaged liquor, this could be a potential district that we might consider, being that these are more of our regional shopping centers. And here's just a few samplings of where we have some current vacancies in our shopping centers along 159th in Harlem. Our B4 is more of our office and service business district. It's, you know, more for smaller transition businesses between residential and commercial areas. The majority of the areas zoned B4 have been developed with office uses, with the exception of Rubino's Plaza at Oak Park Avenue. And they are located along Harlem Avenue at 163rd, 167th, and 171st. There are no significant parcels zoned B4. There's approximately 30, which includes Walgreens, Ingalls Family Care Center, various medical practitioners, and the post office, St. George Church and Banks. And this is kind of the look you see in the B4. It really is more orientated to that office type of use. Our B5 district, we've designated as our automotive service district. Again, this primarily is along 159th Street. That is servicing our car dealerships, the supportive businesses that are more for the vehicles, gas stations, car washes. There are a few small strip centers, but this has been our major corridor for those types of uses. Next, we have our office and restricted industrial district. Again, noted medical cannabis cultivation facility is listed as a special use permit in this district. It's for medium to large office buildings, research activities, and non-objectionable industrial activities. There are numerous areas in town zoned RI. They are mostly clustered along the south side of 183rd Street and between 80th Avenue and Harlem Avenue. Many of them were developed as planned unit developments, which allow for mixes of uses, including M1 and B3. The largest tract of vacant land zoned ORI is the former State Mental Health Center. Second to that are properties west of Brookside Marketplace, adjacent to Panduit's headquarters. The third is at LaGrange Road and 183rd Street, where there's some future land to be redeveloped. That's kind of a aerial view of what you see in our ORI districts, again, servicing many, small contractor shops, small businesses, and more of your kind of warehouse, tilt-up panel looking kind of buildings. M1, general manufacturing. This is our industrial area that we have only a few areas in town that are designated as M1. The first is located west of 80th Avenue and between 183rd Street and I-80. The second is off Prosperity Drive and Oak Park Avenue, just south of I-80. Medical cannabis dispensing facility is listed as a special use permit in the M1 district. And this is a quick shot of our M1 district. There's not a lot future area planned for M1. We've pretty much built that area out with the exception near the amphitheater. There's some property still zoned M1. So the process for us would be if the village were to amend the zoning to permit recreational cannabis dispensaries, we would need to make text amendments to the zoning ordinance. Would there be a public hearing before the Plan Commission? Definitions would need to be created, modifications to the zoning provisions, and first off, we need to identify if it'll be permitted or special use, and specifically what districts. We could possibly place other restrictions such as distance requirements as part of that. We can be up to 1,500 feet from one business to another, or we can be less, and then ultimately would require village board approval by the ordinance. So again, amending the current district to match medical cannabis could be one way where we make recreational similar to medical cannabis, which would limit it to the ORI or M1. We could look at specific business districts, and we can look at making it conditional or a special use. It's kind of the direction we'd be looking for from the community. I've given you a sampling of hopefully how you can see how the business districts function and how they look and where we think they could go. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or gladly love to hear feedback from the community and where they think it's most appropriate.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kimberly. Good evening. Let's just speak briefly about some of the issues with public safety. As a general rule, the public use is prohibited. A public place is defined as any place where a person could reasonably be expected to be observed by others. Civil or criminal penalties are smoking cannabis in a public place, possessing cannabis and using cannabis on school grounds, possessing over the legal amount, driving under the influence, medical patients transferring medical cannabis to non-patients, using cannabis by a law enforcement officer while on duty, using cannabis by a commercial driver's license or a CDL while on duty. We also are at the mercy of the legislature right now, is because the final draft, or the final law has not been put forth, and as soon as it is, we are going to have to adopt the ordinances, because some of these are criminal now, but they might become ordinances for us in the future. We also have to adapt based on Will and Cook County, because Will County will adhere to the 30 grams or less, where Cook County will not prosecute less than 100 grams. So it's something that we have to address, but we'll have to do that at the police department. Also, there's around 800,000 cases that need to be expunged for an arrest charge, order of supervision, or order of qualified probation for minor cannabis offenses. We have yet to determine what a minor cannabis offense is as well. Currently, we believe it's under 30 grams, but like I said, with Cook County, it's under 100. I don't know if they're going to expunge more. or if they're just going to stick to the 30. That's to be determined. We will continue to conduct investigations, establishing probable cause, determine search and seizure procedures, and addressing public safety concerns. Same standard of behavior as alcohol. Consumption of marijuana while driving is prohibited, and driving under the influence of marijuana is treated similarly to driving under the influence of alcohol. Right now, though, there is not a field sobriety test. There is a field sobriety test for marijuana based on vertical gaze nystagmus, but other than that, we don't have a breathalyzer or anything. They're trying to develop something similar to a DUI. It's going to be very challenging for law enforcement to enforce and to go forward with, but it is the state law. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to look for ways to determine how to detect cannabis other than smell. Right now, at least we have the pungent odor. We can do that, but we're going to have to work with the state. We're going to have to update our training, and we're just going to have to continue to seek ways to enforce it. It's going to be difficult.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, so next steps, obviously, we're taking input tonight, but for those who cannot make it, we also are doing a community-wide survey, which will be open through November 24th. The address is on the slide here, and so we encourage you to fill it out, and we're going to share the results from that survey with the board at our next discussion on this on the 3rd. And so, again, the timeline is after the survey closes, is the board will meet on the 3rd, review all input and survey results, and the decision would then be on the December 17th to opt out or permit. So that's it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Number 3 is
Can I ask a question before you move
Yeah, I
on?
was gonna say, why don't you
Go
open
ahead.
up with some questions?
Chief, you said there was 800,000 records that needed to be expunged? That's Tinley Park? Statewide, okay. Just making sure. All right.
More importantly, it's 800,000 people. There's a lot of potheads out here.
Do we roughly know what those numbers are? I know that it's complicated with the 30 versus 100 grams, but
I'll get you a number. I know that I'll be talking to our records clerk, and I'll get you something shortly.
okay. And it sounds like we've got about 3 years to get rid of all of them. So they're staggered. So if you can have a breakdown, that'd be great.
Anyone else have anything?
Is anyone else concerned about the enforcement aspect of it for policing it? I mean, I mean, I'm just kind of in awe that they're relying on a field sobriety, but that's typically not held up in a court. So I use the word typically as, I mean, less than 50% of the time, or maybe right at 50% of the time. But I just think it's putting the police in a really particular difficult situation. Is there a timeline on when they may be looking at a field sobriety or a mechanical aspect of a sobriety?
We're working on one, but I don't know when they'll actually get one that's approved and it's reliable.
You know what, we talked about this at the last Public Safety Committee meeting, I think, and I think it's a little bit more difficult than, I think, Stan, you could probably help out a little bit, because they have to measure nanograms in the blood,
Yes.
or it's got to meet a certain threshold to,
Right now, the only way to determine that is through a blood analysis. There is no breath or swab or anything other than blood. And it's a process, and it's a long process.
so I think it's just putting our police in a difficult position too, so.
Yeah.
Is the state providing us some training that we can take advantage of, or is this kind of on our own?
No, it's not new. I mean, we stop people every day that are smoking marijuana, but there's no foolproof way to like a breathalyzer for alcohol that we have to utilize. I mean, the problem we're gonna have is establishing probable cause, because if people are allowed to have the recreational use, I mean, the stuff now is so strong and pungent that you might smell it even if it's not smoked, so we have to determine if they were smoking it while they were driving, or if they just had it, if they're allowed to have it on their person, we don't know. It's gonna be tough, but it's the law.
Gotcha. Similar problems to with alcohol, but slightly different. Similar problems to alcohol, but
Right.
slightly different. And then, I didn't have a chance to ask you beforehand, Pat, but have we looked at all at prohibiting in the unincorporated areas surrounding us?
I don't think we have.
And-
You mean the county areas?
Yes.
Around us? I think the counties, I want to say, I think Cook County has allowed it in there, unincorporated, or, actually, no, I'd have to look at that.
find out.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. That's a good point. I know one of the counties did do something, you know, on
The
the
books?
unincorporated areas, boundary, that border those areas. I just don't remember which way they went, but I'll look at it and get back to you.
Thank you, Pat.
One item I wanted to comment to the chief's comment about the potency. One of the things we had heard is that the odor can be strong when you have these businesses going into strip centers. Sometimes that odor leaks into some of the other adjacent businesses, so kind of another thing to take into consideration if it's a special use, maybe there's some conditions you can place, but that's one thing we heard as being an issue in some of the.
But more
Kimberly,
for
is,
standalone?
is that, are you talking about just in a dispensary, or are you talking about a smoke on premises?
Dispensary.
Oh, too,
Yeah, the
okay.
Yeah, the smell can still leach over. Even you got these older strip centers, probably a little separating them. But it's one thing to take into consideration. It might hinder people wanting to be next to them.
Right.
Certain businesses. Definitely wouldn't want a daycare next there.
Oh, put the kid to sleep.
Anybody else? Number 3, then, we'll receive comments from the public. This, before anyone speaks, usually, we have a 6-minute rule for public comment, but this is more of like our town hall meeting for it. So if you're gonna speak about anything in regards to the cannabis, we're not gonna have I'm gonna forego the clock, but if it's anything general, then we'll stick to the 6-minute clock. So, anyone feel free to, who wants to be first?
They're gonna race.
You talked about a survey, is that gonna be on the website?
Yes.
And just if we go to the website, the survey will be there, and it needs to be done by the 24th?
Yeah. Dave, or Donna,
That'll also be pushed out on our Facebook page, on our community calendar center.
Will things be mailed to everyone in the,
Not via postal mail, but through our social media and also on our.
which means there's a lot of people who aren't on social media that won't even get this unless they know about it.
Our newspapers are also helping with the survey out there. I'll be having that and they'll be in the paper. So I
Right.
thank you very much.
And they don't read the newspapers anymore either.
People are emailing with comments too, and I mean, if there's email comments, we'll accept
There's no
those,
other
too,
way
so.
to get any more, I mean, I think you'd want to survey as many people as possible and not just those who happen to know to take the survey. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Well, Donna, do you want to speak to the other survey that we did, where folks said newspaper was one of the strongest sources of
Yeah, our
information?
citizen survey, the information, we did ask people how they were getting information from the village, and our newspapers came up fairly high. So it's,
So we couldn't get like the Boy Scouts or something to put flyers on everybody's doors.
She might work.
hopefully word of mouth will pass. All right, thanks.
Maybe we could take, Donna, are we taking an ad out in the junction or anything like that?
Our newspapers are partnering with us to get.
Ma'am, do you receive the Tinley Park Junction? Comes out every Thursday, or close to it?
I think everybody does.
No, if you live in a condo, you don't, you have to sign up.
Okay.
Okay.
Come here? Somebody help us.
Yeah, no, we understand. I mean, that's part of the reason the board asked to have this summit, so that we could start to collaborate as much information as possible from the residents.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Bill Beckman. I've lived in Tinley Park since 1974, and I just want to express my sincere concerns about the whole process that the state already went through in terms of legalizing it, and living in that environment is dangerous enough, so I would suggest that doing anything to limit that would be the best thing we can do. So since I understand that Orland Park just recently made that decision and did ban, I would strongly urge you to follow that example and go in the same direction, because as the police chief indicated, I mean, there's already enough issues right there to just say whatever we can do to reduce the occurrence, and not having dispensaries in our community would at least help reduce the occurrence. And as the other person pointed out here, that there could be, you know, businesses affected adversely. I already know from working with St. Vincent de Paul at St. George that there's people that we serve that are living next to other people that are currently using cannabis and having adverse effects on other residents in their buildings, and it's not even legal yet. So it'll only get aggravated by the fact that people will be able to do this, and so it's. I was at a presentation back in like, I think it was March, given by Illinois Family Institute on all the issues that have been created out in Colorado. And I have a sheet here. I actually emailed each of you a link to this earlier today, but there's all kinds of information out there about the issues. And I've seen stories just recently that there's nothing wrong in Colorado, but I think somehow something's getting covered up, because there's people giving strong testimonies that there's lots of problems in Colorado. So, you know, whatever we can do to help limit the damage. I mean, my strongest concern would be like have the Illinois legislature repeal the whole thing and let's go back to having a more safe environment and not have this at all. But since we can't right now do that, to try to limit the damages the best we can would be what I would strongly recommend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a bunch of statistics here, and I feel like they are important statistics. I think with this matter, it's you need to look at facts, and I think people are already smoking marijuana across the country. It's not going away, and the state has legalized it, and you can't undo that part of it. I think with that in mind, it seems like the wrong move to prohibit it from being sold in the city. As far as the dangers go, it is virtually impossible to overdose from marijuana. The plant itself is not dangerous. What people do while they're high might be dangerous. Colorado saw 170 extra traffic deaths in the first 6 months after legalization, but after 3 years, that number dropped down below the original number. In fact, a study found that from the American Journal of Public Health, there was no statistical difference in crash death rates in 3 years after the legalization of marijuana. In addition to that, 29% of all traffic deaths are related to alcohol, over 10,500 traffic deaths in Illinois. That is significant. That is a very significant number, and yet we have, 3 or 4 bars in downtown. We have bars all over 159th. There are bars everywhere. I mean, that seems like a more important issue to address. There are over 1.4 million alcohol-related activities, actions of violence committed against strangers each year. That's related to alcohol. Again, I say that only as a comparison because I could not find a statistic that said how marijuana increases the numbers of violent acts of crime. I could not find one. Right? I looked up Colorado teens. When teenagers when it was illegal, when it was prohibited, were smoking higher rates. In 3 years in Colorado after legalization, the use of marijuana among teens had a significant drop in statistics. Teens stopped using it when it became legal. So aside from that, the dangers I think are not, I don't think the dangers are as bad as alcohol or gambling, which can be addicted. Those things seem much more of a danger to our community than someone who's smoking weed. As far as statistics and facts, over 70% of adults have tried it at least once, and over 40% of those people continue to smoke. In 2017, a study found that 1 in 7 people use it. That is a lot of people. Like I said, people are smoking it everywhere. It's now legal. The closest dispensary is in Mokina. It's, I believe, for medical, and same with Homewood and Midlothian. With Orland having just banned the sale of marijuana, people are going to be looking for somewhere to get it. Okay? We can't, like I said, we can't turn over the state's decision to legalize it. So how do you adapt to it? Well, in Colorado, sales for marijuana, tax revenue for marijuana has surpassed $1 billion. Colorado experimented and found in the first year there were only 30 dispensaries open. It caused prices to rise, and the black market actually thrived because of that, because people couldn't get it anywhere. So they increased to 300 stores by the year's end and drove down prices, and monthly sales topped 35 million a month. It's clear that more stores increase the taxable sales. We talked about some of the taxes that the state imposes and what you can impose. And as an example, Denver, Colorado, and Aurora raked in $36 million and $10 million respectively in marijuana taxes alone last year. Tinley Park sits near several towns that do not allow the sale of marijuana, as well as 2 major highways, with no significant data supporting an increase in violence or danger to the community, and plenty of significant data that shows the financial benefit of taxing marijuana. It makes much more sense to allow dispensaries. If you want to increase revenue in the state, in the city, it seems like a logical conclusion to allow it. People are going to pass right through here going to all the other ones if you don't. I think it's the choice of whether it's a special use or not. I think that's up for debate. I think that is more of an important debate than whether or not to allow it. Personally, I feel like as a benefit to our town, you need that tax revenue. That seems like a more reasonable, factual thing to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to address the board?
Good evening. I'm actually not going to address what's on the cow this evening, although the last gentleman who spoke, I agree with him 100%. What I would like to do is just address the Tinley Park Mental Health Center at this point. Today, a report was made with the NRC, which is the National Response Center. I've also spoken to the US EPA, the Illinois EPA, and the MWRD, all of which are beginning to look into the issues with the Tinley Park Mental Health Center. Unfortunately, it's a slow process. I really don't have any other information than that, other than when the report went through the National Response Center, that report then gets filtered down to numerous other agencies and departments, some of which is just informational to them, just to let them know that there's a report. 23 agencies received that report today. Most of them are here in Cook County, Chicago, Illinois, so numerous different agencies at this point. If I have further information, I will certainly pass that on, but I would strongly encourage this board to begin contacting the same agencies that I have. I think it coming from the village will be a much stronger message than just coming from a resident. The property needs to be remediated and cleaned. It poses, the potential for catastrophe is there. We listened to Chief Reeder. If there is a fire, keep in mind that there are 150 barrels of unknown contaminants throughout that property. That I cannot stress enough how dangerous that is. They couldn't fight the fire. They can't get to it, nor would I want them to get to it. It's too dangerous. There's so many things. We know kids go in there. We know we do. The buildings are all tagged. They're all spray painted. We know they're in there. It is a catastrophe waiting to happen. But I think coming from the village, along with the residents, will have a much greater impact with the state of Illinois, the US EPA, the federal EPA, and it's really nice that, Jake, you won't even look. You don't even pay attention. You don't say a word. You just sit there and look at your screen. Are you going to do anything? We elected you to represent us. Do something. Please, do something.
Mr. Chairman.
Good evening. The village has been contacted by two people in our businesses, is that correct? Ray Klinsky Pulmonary Exchange. According to the website, he's a doctor and owns a medical supply store. You don't know? I know the name. Oh, okay. You spoke to him on the phone or no?
Yeah,
Okay, okay. Do they have a state license to open up a dispensary? Okay, Earth Med also contacted you. Okay, Earth Med, they have quite a few dispensaries. I think maybe the latest one might be in Addison that's gonna open up in maybe January. So I assume obviously they have a state license. Will retail stores in Tinley Park be able to sell drug paraphernalia? It's a tough one there, I guess. So I guess we'll have to look into that then, huh?
We'll have to look into what? Whether all retail stores can? Sure, we can look into it.
Yeah, will they be able to sell drug paraphernalia?
This law doesn't grant that blanket authority.
I'm just asking can a liquor store sell a shatter pipe?
I don't know what a shatter pipe is.
Does anybody know what shatter is?
No, I don't.
Has anybody looked at a medical dispensary menu?
I have not.
Okay. Shatter is a cannabis extract with a THC content between 80 and 90%. It retails for around $60 a gram. It's called shatter because it's hard, translucent layer, similar to glass. When dropped, it shatters. This isn't a knock on this at all, because CBD also produces a shatter. CBD's really big right now. I think it's bigger than marijuana because CBD is hemp. So I just wanted, I thought I'd throw that out there. These are just questions that, if we're going to go through the process, and I don't have the date up there, but if the board is going to vote on something, I think people should know what the stores are going to be able to, what they're going to be selling. There are many other products that are extracts of cannabis. They sell drinks, oils, tinctures, creams, and balms, and a variety of concentrates. I think everyone should be educated as to what dispensaries will be selling. My fear would be that if Tinley Park opens up a dispensary, I shouldn't say fear, I'll strike that, disregard that. If somebody comes up to somebody on the board and says, oh my God, are you kidding me? You know, they're selling this, and somebody on the board says, oh, I didn't know that, because right now, people are sitting in front of me, staff doesn't even know what they're selling. So it's not a fear-mongering thing by any means, but I think we should educate ourselves on what these dispensaries will be selling. And also, I think we need to look into can a liquor store sell a pipe or a bong or, you know, a one-hitter? That's something to think about. I came here to get educated by staff and to inform some of the people on some of the things that I've read about. One other thing, statistics. I saw statistics that say the opposite of what the gentleman said behind me, but then also I saw statistics that backed his up. So it's really hard. You can Google the statistics, and they're all over the map. So it's really hard to say as far as the revenue. The revenue is a big thing. It's either there or it isn't. So the revenues, that's hard to say. Traffic accidents, it depends because they don't tie in alcohol with marijuana consumption. Edibles is a big thing from what I've read. You know, that could be pretty dangerous to get in other people's hands. But just a couple of things to throw out to the board. I think we need the board, I should say staff, because staff will recommend. I think you need to look at what these, you know, what the dispensaries will be selling. They all sell the same thing, medical and recreational, but just get to be aware of yourself what they're selling. So it's not a knock on anything. I'm not up here to advocate the usage or not usage, and I'm not up here to say I don't want it in my town. It's just something that I'm throwing out here to somewhat of a discussion before we set this date. I don't know if we can back the date up. I mean, if we don't, I think we're already opted in. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's really a rush. But that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Yeah, and we are not Mr. Stuckey, we're not opted in. That's January 1 is the deadline for that. If we don't do anything by January 1, we're opted in. So we're in unless we opt out. So that's the way the law works. We'd have to affirmatively opt out prior to January 1. That's the deadline for.
Okay, if we don't do anything by January 1, we're good. And that doesn't mean we're going to do it, but we don't really have to, right?
Well, it means that we can't prohibit it. So
Right.
then, right?
I think that would be the safe way to go in the long run, in my opinion, and take slow baby steps. That's just my opinion.
Sure, that's
you know,
a decision up to
I'm opposed to saying no, we don't want it because let's see what else happens down the road.
I'm just giving you the date. That's
Yeah.
the date. It's January 1. You said we were already opted in. We're not.
Thank you. Thanks.
And then just one more point. This new law is broad. There's parts of the law that we didn't even touch on that we've gone over as staff. There's employment issues, things like that. As far as what will be sold in those, the pipes or the bongs or whatever, I think that's a good point. I think those are being sold right now. And I know they couch a lot of that in tobacco sales, so that's something we will look at. But, the staff here is, we just want to present a small part of what this board has to, decide before January 1. That was kind of the idea tonight. So.
Yeah, I understand that's why I came here, but I think if we could curb the retail, if there's going to be a dispensary open up, let them make their money instead of liquor store, 7-Eleven.
That's a good point, yeah.
Whoever else, because otherwise it's going to get out of hand. So, thank you.
Hey, Brad, could you, correct me if I'm wrong, the maximum allowed tax revenue that we would get off of that if we did opt in is 4.75%, correct? There's 3% extra that we could charge.
Yes. The 3% that's allowed for the cannabis, as well as the 1.75% portion of the sales tax that we receive, yes.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board?
Hi, good evening. I come here because I am a strong proponent for a retail recreational dispensary in Tinley Park. I think you made a good point about the smell going over to other businesses, and I think it should be in a kind of like an industrial area, out of the way of Oak Park Avenue, I have 18 years of experience living in California. Most of that was medicinal. Some of it was after they legalized it for recreational purposes. I have seen strong security, 2 or 3 guards outside. I have never heard of any problems, including robberies, because it's primarily a cash business, even though where I was in San Jose, they did allow debit cards, and I know we're not here to discuss that. I think Tinley Park would be missing a good opportunity for extra revenue. I'm glad that you brought up that we already have pipes and bongs and things already for sale in smoke shops and vape shops. I don't see any adverse activity around those places. I started in California as a medicinal patient because of arthritis, insomnia, and PTSD. And also, while I lived there, I was able to purchase, my mother is 99 years old, and she has very bad foot neuropathy because she's old. And while I lived there, I was able to bring it home to her. And now she's kind of upset, and she's also hopeful that I might be able to buy that for her again. And I know, again, we're talking about recreational, but as somebody already mentioned, the same products are going to be available. Well, I used to be a meeting planner for a biopharmaceutical company, and when I was not able to fall asleep, because these are stressful jobs where you might be up till midnight one night, you gotta be up at 6 in the morning. Every one of my teammates were hooked on Ambien, and they were not fun to be around, and they were not productive. And I was the person that was up and at 'em because I was able to fall asleep with a couple of hits of cannabis. So I really hope you strongly consider it. Trying to think what else. If you care to see some of the dispensaries that I have had experience with, you can look at Harborside in Oakland and San Jose. And I was just recently in April at a place called the Treehouse in Sokol, near Monterey, California. They are beautiful places. You can walk in there and they are, here's your creams, here's edibles, here's plants, like clones for people that can grow but might have a hard time from seeds. They check security, but I strongly urge you to look up some of the dispensaries that are already in place. But again, I definitely think they should be out in areas where, like, more, I don't know what zone it was, but somewhere away from the public, adequate parking, good security. And as far as the law enforcement goes, I have been to many seminars given by LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And I also strongly urge you to look at some of their thoughts on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for doing this tonight.
Evening.
I'm really ambivalent about whether there are dispensaries or not, so I'm not up here to advocate or oppose. I like the idea of the survey. My only concern would be that it be an accurate reflection of community sentiment. So my only question is there a way to ensure that respondents cannot respond more than once?
We'll be using SurveyMonkey for it, and I believe it does have some limitations on the same IP address.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Good evening. I am a resident of Tinley Park, and I oppose this. This is a family community. I don't think we need this. I think you're exposing people to this, and I realize it is all around, even if it's not legal, but there's no need to. And it all comes down to money. The whole reason the state even approved it is because we are fiscally handicapped. And so now, every other community is trying to do it for the same reason. I think you need to be concerned about your citizens. You're going to expose people to it that probably wouldn't do it, and now they will because you're going to legalize it. Because you're going to have it here in the community. A lot of the surrounding communities did not. They are not opting in, and I would hope that you would also not opt in. Because all that means is we're going to have more traffic here, we're going to have more problems. I read the Tinley Junction every week. I see the issues, especially around 183rd and Harlem. How many more things are you going to have there? And how many other issues are we going to have? And I know the gentleman talked about Colorado. I also looked at that. They don't know. I read conflicting stories on every single one. And I just think, as a family community, I really think you need to think about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board on this issue?
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name's Dominic. I've been a resident of Tinley Park for 36 years. I've been a successful business owner in Tinley Park for 13 years. I want to say that I'm a strong supporter of this. It's legalized now in the state. It's going to be legalized everywhere. Yes, the communities, some of the communities around us are opting out of this, but it's just going to draw more people to our community for this whole entertainment district. Music is our thing. I think it'd be foolish to pass up on this. You know, I think a lot of people aren't realizing this is going to be a very, very highly regulated industry. Where the CBD industry is barely regulated at all right now. This stuff, these plants are literally tracked from when they're 6 inches tall until the final joint comes out after the fact of everything. These places are required to have extremely, extremely good HVAC filtration systems. There should be very minimal smells, odors, anything going to adjacent properties. They're all going to be required to have security staff on site all hours while they're open. So, I mean, just think that this is going to be something a lot more regulated than I think a lot of people think that it is. You know, that's all I really have to say about it, and please consider supporting this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening.
Very rarely do I speak in a public platform. But for the sake of discovery, I think it's important, the education behind the topic. I think that it's very important that everyone equip themselves with House Bill 1438. It's 610 pages. A lot of the questions regarding the topic, I think, would be easily answered if you took a look at the bill. I first and foremost think that it's important that parents understand responsibility, okay? I think it's very important, I'll say it again, responsibility as a parent, responsibility to your children to make sure that you understand what they're doing in and outside of your own house. I think that also, as it relates to zoning requirements, maybe that things that could be considered with the smell situation. More so if you can regulate how well the filtration systems are. I think that alcohol and drunk driving, if I'm not mistaken, somebody made a statistical quote saying that it was a very heavily causing death, or whatever the rate was. I don't know exactly how to say it, but I know it is the #1 reason for deaths, drunk driving. And one of the things that I know that is different between alcohol and cannabis, because it's not just marijuana, it's a plant, right? So when you have a drunk driving situation, you really kind of get riled up, you know, as opposed to when you're kind of smoking and when you have a more relaxed state of mind, should I say, from a plant, your encounter with the law is a lot different. You know, it's more so, well, how are you, Mr. Officer? Good to see you tonight. Let me check my, driving ranges here and so on and so forth, versus, hey, well, what are you stopping me for? You know, so there's an entirely different paradigm, should I say, as it relates to how one would act while under the influence. But that's not my, case to differ on. I just think it's really, really important that people get highly educated. The tax revenue business is business. It will continue to be so as always, right? The state has always been fiscally irresponsible. You guys have to pay them whatever you pay them. I get all of that, right? But at the same time, you know, the appetite for money is just never ending in government from what I've seen, okay? So it's not my position to speak on that much. But what I do think is, I just think it's really important that people be responsible, because the truth of the matter is that this plant has been growing on the planet since the day the planet was made. It has infused the atmosphere, the air that we breathe, okay? Whereas alcohol, it's a little bit different, right? It had to be created in order for us to kind of feel some type of way. This thing is natural. So there's a lot of different things that kind of are really, really important to kind of consider. Specifically, I would ask everyone here to grant yourselves a little latitude just to educate yourselves thoroughly on the topic before maybe making a hurried decision. Because as many bars as I've seen throughout the landscape of just this state alone, I just got off a plane back into the country. One of the things that I know is that the world is drinking continuously, you know? So nobody's at a shortage for getting wonderful networking events and drinking, having holiday cheer and so on and so forth, right? But as it relates to this situation, there are many people that are in need of this plant and the uses that it can be used for. And it's not for me to say that you can't have when your body naturally needs it for whatever reason it may be. So I just think that it would be important for everyone to really get educated on the topic and just really kind of consider, you know, just the attributes of responsibility as a whole to oneself, to one's kids, to one's community. You know, and obviously we all have jobs, so, you know, revenue is what it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? The record reflect there are none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.